We were sitting in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, during this trip, when we got the first information of what the South African media was saying about our trip, which was of great symbolic value. I mean, something like that had never happened before. I mean, mostly Afrikaners meeting the ANC, the enemy, the big communist terrorist threat. And I knew in my heart that this was a very positive thing. It was a very important thing, symbolically. We had no mandate to talk to, I mean, I didn't represent anybody. But just as a symbolic gesture, and to break the ice and to tell people on all sides, you actually can talk. Negotiations, politics is the future. And I sat there and looked at what the newspapers were saying, and it was an absolute shock. Even the sort of critical English language newspapers were like absolutely condemning what we were doing. And I was sitting there, and I remember clearly next to the swimming pool with Preez, who was like an old anti-apartheid figure here, and Breitenbach, who's a poet and anti-apartheid figure, quite some important symbolic figure, and Van Robert. And I said, what the hell is this? I mean, what do we do? How do we fix this? If this is what people back home are being fed, how will we ever get any kind of movement towards a settlement of our problem? And then Preez challenged me. He said, well, you're a journalist, this is the way you feel. If you're not a bullshit, then you will go back home and start a newspaper that will reflect the new reality. And you will do it in Afrikaans, because if it's in English, it doesn't have an effect. People, Afrikaans, white Afrikaans people, would reject a message that doesn't come in their own language. And that's, I don't know if it's unique to Afrikaners, but if you, at least at that point, you had to speak to them in their own language. Otherwise, you can just write you off, because that's what we expect. I suppose it's a bit of a hangover of the Anglo-Boer War and what happened after. And that's what I did. I came back and had a few colleagues, 4 of them, brave enough to do this thing. And we launched a newspaper in 1987 called Vrye Weekblad, which means a free and independent weekly, which was the first anti-apartheid Afrikaans publication in this country, and took quite a radical position. And we would, there were a lot of sort of liberal Afrikaners who still now said we were mad to do it, because what you really needed to do was to sugarcoat the problem, gently start telling people, apartheid is not such a nice idea, and gently. And I said, well, it's either you tell them exactly what is going on. It's too late for that kind of soft treatment. It's too late for sugarcoating the pills. And, well, maybe it was a mistake or not, I don't think so. But we came full on. Our first headline, our first front page lead was on Nelson Mandela, saying, here's this man. And we had an illegal drawing of him, a painting of him as our front cover, saying we should pin our hopes on the release of this man, because he has the capacity, the charisma, the experience, and the credibility all around to help break this logjam. So we should start campaigning for him to be released, because he is our best chance of a peaceful transition. And we were met with a great amount of shock by the Afrikaans community. The government would have loved to have closed this down, but the mere fact that I was an Afrikaner made it much easier, much more difficult for them, because they did close some of the other alternative newspapers at the time down. I mean, New Nation was closed down for a month, and so was the Weekly Mail, which is now the Mail and Guardian. But so they did another tactic, and they knew that we didn't have money. I mean, literally, the first few months of this newspaper were financed by my pension money, and I sold my art collection, all my policies, and we scraped together here and there, and we didn't get salaries and stuff. The paper was owned by the staff. And they started bombarding us with court cases. I forget the exact amount, about 11 defamation cases against me, all from politicians and generals. And I won all of them but one. But it exhausted I spent more time in court than in my newsroom. And it exhausted our money. I have, as I sit here, I have a very long criminal record of breaking the suppression of Communism Act, the Internal Security Act, the Internal Safety Act, and it goes on and on and on, for quoting banned people, reporting from a township where there's a state of emergency, exposing an agent of a secret agent of the state, all those kind of things. But again, this, now you're in the open, and you're associated with the ANC and the UDF, and then that emboldens you, and that's what you become.